So at the end of the last video, I talked about states and how we can use a state instead of an if for a slightly more advanced version of this effect. So we're going to bring in two state machines, or so two states, and a state machine. When a particle is emitted, it's emitted with a state, in this case state 0. We're going to bring these in order. One of the great things about state machine includes the simulate particle, so we can actually delete the simulate particle node and just use a state machine instead. I'm going to delete the if statement here and the particle colors for a second and bring these two states in and link them into the state machine. Let's get a bit closer in here, and you can see, just bring that one there. Just get everything lined up neatly. Bring the execute state here into state 1, execute state here into state 2. If we double click on here, we can see we can actually debug by looking at set the particle state color. So we'll go blue here, and down here we'll make it red as before, and again turn this on. This will be state 1. Okay. And the first state, this will be state 0, but it will go to state 1, and we can make any state go to any state. So you could say go from 0 when it's triggered, go to 1. This state could go from 1 when it's triggered, it go back to 0 again. So we can jump between states if we want to. To make a state change, you need a trigger. In this way, we'll use our test inside null as a trigger. Again, this state's very simple. When it's triggered, it's going to change these into the next state. And it will give you almost identical effect. You've got the blue particles. When they're inside here, they turn red. In this case, it goes stay red because there's no trigger to send you back to this first one. If you want to, you could do a test and you could do a not, and if it wasn't that test, it would send them back. So you've got the test inside null. We could get a not node. We could take this one here, the value of here, into this trigger, and then say go back to state 0. And now, if it's inside there, they're red, and as they come out, they turn blue again, because we're triggering this one to cycle back to 0. So we actually have a little loop style system here. If it works, it goes to 1. If it doesn't, it goes back to 0, and it's jumping between these states. You can go from any state to any state, and state's extremely powerful to do multiple different effects. Let's go ahead and also have state 1 make the particles blow in a certain direction by creating and adding a force. So if we type add, there's an add forces. Again, we could look under the particle forces as well if you're looking under these. Add forces, and under each state, similar to the emit node, you have several different executes. You have an execute on every frame, you have an execute on trigger, you have an execute once on enter. So there's lots of options. In this case, I'd like to execute this on every frame when I'm inside this state. And you can have multiple executes on once or every frame, or however you want to do it. So we have a force here. This force right now is a 0, 0, 0 force, so it's not much of a force. But if we give this force maybe 1 in the z for a moment, you'll see when they're emitted, when it's inside the force, it's going to push them out. And of course, the minute they come out, they're coming out of the effect, so the force stops. So this force only really works inside for a little bit, and then of course it doesn't keep going. If we move this lower down, you can see the force effect. and it's kind of blowing the particles out to the side and giving them in a force. And that's just another way of creating an effect. Of course, if this was out, you can only make certain particles be affected by this force. So you can see here, nothing's been affected. As I move it in, then it starts pushing the particles out. And there we are, simple force. You can create other forces if you just type force. You can see there's a drag force, gravity force, neighboring particle force, point force, lots of different forces you can use. I just use an add force, but you can have multiple forces and have them linked together or blending together to create some pretty advanced force effects as well. And you can also make your own force just by adding mathematical nodes in and create like a vortex force or a spiral force if you want to.